Hello again. Before I introduce my next guest, let's get back to what the channel is all about with some wildlife footage, on this occasion of a European hedgehog. They love to be in tunnels, which is why holes cut into fences are good as wildlife corridors. My next guest and thinker is Matthew Yeadon, co-director of Natureland Seal Sanctuary, England. I began by asking him to describe his career.
I certainly can. So I started working with animals in general back in when I was 12 years old, basically here at Natureland. I was a volunteer at the weekends that quickly turned into a small kind of weekend paid position, if you like, working with sheep and goats, cleaning out Pets Corner. I did that for a few years through kind of my GCSEs and whatnot. And then obviously A-levels, they get a bit more intense. So I backed down from that role temporarily. I then went to university to study agriculture. To be fair, I didn't stick at that all too long. I found that maybe wasn't the right course for me. And then came back to the business to instead work in the entrance. So completely different change of scene, not working with the animals, just letting customers in. From there, I then did a summer at a chip shop, completely different change of pace again. And then with the intention of going back to uni to do animal behaviour and training, I then got offered the position of working in our seal hospital at Natureland instead, and our aquarium, so the aquarist and seal hospital role. I did that for 2 years instead of going to university. And then my uncle and my dad, who were running the business at the time, my uncle became unwell. He got cancer, sadly. So I stepped into his position to give my dad a helping hand because he lost half his management team, basically. And from there, kind of stuck with it. And my dad's now retired, so myself and my cousin run the business full time now.
Sorry to hear about your uncle. What advice do you have for somebody wanting to work with seals? What jobs out there are there?
There's quite a few different jobs revolving around seals and pinnipeds and that sort of species, really. Obviously, the obvious one is a zookeeper or a rescue worker in a sanctuary like Natureland. There are a lot of different sanctuaries around the UK now. They keep popping up everywhere. So we're covering most of the coastline, including in Ireland and Scotland as well. So there are plenty of us. A lot of places are volunteer based, but there are plenty of paid positions as well. The Sea Life centres are predominantly paid. So I'd say getting early experience is very important with any animals. Seals are very specialist, so you'd be lucky if you do get full-on seal experience, but any animal experience is very valuable to getting into a role. And as time goes on, if you're looking at a more zoo type place to work, like a Sea Life attraction or like ourselves, where we have other animals as well, qualifications are becoming a big thing now. Inspectors that issue our license are looking for trained workers to be working for us, not just anybody. So you have to be able to provide some sort of qualification. We are quite lenient with it ourselves at Natureland, so level 3 diplomas, that sort of thing with animal care is perfectly acceptable and great, all the way up to marine biology degrees and beyond, really. So experience and qualifications are the big ones, and then just enthusiasm and dedication to animals in general. Seals are very niche and they're very difficult at times. They're very boisterous, very up and down with their health when you're working with rescued ones, so you really got to be in it for the long haul, really.
Matt, what skills and personal qualities does a person need to work with seals?
Skills, I'd say observational skills are a big one. Working with seals, they're very good at hiding illnesses from you, and you have to really keep your eyes open until it gets severe. So compassion, they are wonderful little animals to work with, and you've got to care about the animals that you're working with, so that's very important. And dedication as well. Sometimes you could be working very long hours with seals that are particularly unwell, and that dedication does often mean the difference between life and death when you're working with very unwell animals. So those are the kind of core qualities we'd be looking for, as well as just a general interest, really, and a willingness to develop your interests and your knowledge base as well. It's always good to learn new things and adapt to working with animals. They always like to throw new things at you, so you've got to be willing to adapt.
How is running a seal sanctuary different to running a zoo?
Well, it depends on which sanctuary you ask. For us, it's fundamentally very similar to running a zoo. We are having to abide by zoo licensing conditions and whatnot. However, with that on-site rescue and release of native species, there's a whole other level. I know that a lot of zoos all over the country and beyond work with conservation and whatnot, but often that's through third parties, and it's ex situ, whereas in situ conservation is a lot different. You've got to really adapt to working with these animals full time. It's caring for potentially very unwell animals that will constantly test you and challenge you to figure out what's wrong with them, really. So it's a lot less routine. Animal jobs in general aren't very routine, but when you're working with rescued animals as well, it adds a whole other level to that game.
In terms of conservation, how do they work differently? I'm thinking that, in zoos, the biggest aim you can have is captive breeding, followed by perhaps reintroduction into the wild. How does it work with sanctuaries?
Sanctuaries are a lot more in the realm of we're rescuing existing animals that are already out in the wild and giving them that second chance at life in the wild rather than a first chance, and helping to input new blood into populations. We are helping the existing populations to stay nice and stable, hopefully anyway, as best we can. And providing medical attention to animals that maybe wouldn't have had that chance to survive out in the wild and giving them, that second chance.
Can many illnesses in seals be treated by, for want of a better expression, a layperson, or do you always need a vet on hand?
We always go through a vet for advice on medical treatment. However, the actual administration of drugs and other care can be done in-house without the need for a vet coming to us. Unless it's particularly specialist, like surgery, obviously you would want a vet involved, but quite often it's administering injections and pills in fish that you would then force feed down them. So we can train all of that and do that ourselves as long as the vet's advised it first.
How would you describe seal sanctuaries today in Britain?
They've developed a long way. They've always had that fundamental, certainly Natureland has always had that fundamental goal to rescue, rehabilitate and release back. And quite a lot of our practices are very similar to how they were when we first started in 1965. We found that a lot of it can carry straight through into modern day practices. Obviously, the medication has improved. Our knowledge of seals research has improved a lot. So therefore, the type of care we can offer them has improved substantially. But the fundamentals have always stayed the same, really, that our goal is to rescue, rehabilitate, release, and the methods have not changed all that much in many aspects.
How do you see seal sanctuaries changing over the next 10 years, Matt?
I would hope to see a positive change in that, a further expansion on our kind of understanding of seals, maybe working towards preventative care rather than just curative care. Learning what might be coming up in the wild populations, and therefore being able to buffer ourselves, whether it's with medication or care practices in general, to prevent further spread of these diseases. Obviously, illnesses like the distemper virus are terrifying at all times. We don't want to see that come back because it's an untreatable disease and often lethal as well. So research towards that would always be valuable, but just a better communication as well between other sanctuaries. It is developing nicely, and the when myself and my cousin first started working here as directors, there wasn't much communication really between other sanctuaries. We had a bit down the road with Mablethorpe and over the Wash with Eastwinch, which is the RSPCA, but other than that there was minimal direct contact between other sanctuaries. But in the last 2 years it's developed phenomenally to the point where we're in contact with virtually all sanctuaries on a daily basis in the UK and across into Europe as well. So Peter Buren, for example, is in constant contact really over group chats on WhatsApp. So technology has really helped kind of conversations grow, and therefore general group learning on seals grow as well.
Well, that's really interesting. What sort of things do you discuss during these meetings?
Well, it's mostly sightings, which is always interesting to see. Obviously, we all tag our seals and we all have individual tag codes. So seeing your seal pop up in the Netherlands, for example, is quite exciting to see. It's joined a colony there and doing very well, and vice versa. When we rescue a seal that's we've got 2 in at the moment, one called Dutch, who's from the Netherlands, and a German one as well. So it's interesting to see kind of patterns of migration and movement in seals. And then any illnesses that we're not quite sure of, we can now send a photo, obviously straight through WhatsApp to a group of maybe 100 or more seal experts and say, what's this all about? There's a seal with its teeth falling out. What's this all about? And chances are they've seen it and they'll know a medication that can be used on it. So we can then refer that to our vets and go from there. So it's a great learning tool that we all have. And then we have the annual seal rescue conference as well that's hosted. I mean, it was done online, obviously, through COVID, but I think they did it in the Netherlands this year, actually. Everybody hauled themselves over there. We weren't able to attend, but everyone hauled over there and basically got together and chatted about it in person and said, what do we want to research? And got some specialists in that are studying mouth rot, for example, that we're not sure how to cure. We've got laboratory tests being done now because of this communication. So it's really useful.
What's the status, please, Matt, of both the British species, the common and the grey seal? Are they stable? Are they increasing, decreasing?
They are both on considered least concern. So they are on the red list and they are considered not at threat, but getting towards that level. However, the grey seal population, certainly since 2016, has been increasing. Harbours are a little bit harder to judge. They are unknown, basically, as far as the red list is concerned anyway, whether they're going up or down.
What threats do the two species face, Matt?
Certainly around the UK, there's not too much in the way of predation from other animals. Obviously, up north, there are orcas cruising around that might take a snap at a seal, but it's not too common. The main threats that they're facing at the moment is probably pollution and other human-based input. We are seeing more and more seals turn up with injuries such as entanglement, and I know a lot of places that are able to study their seals in even more depth than we are seeing microplastics inside seals. Other than that, disruption at pupping sites, as people get more interested in nature, obviously you get the ones that don't respect nature too much. They are intruding, and technology bringing out drones means that a drone can easily fly over Donna Nook, for example, and spook adults and therefore get babies abandoned and whatnot. So it's quite important that we try and push our side of things as a sanctuary, and as a sanctuary that's open to the public, we try our best to educate people on kind of the risks that they're facing because of us, so therefore we can hopefully limit it.
Yes, Donna Nook actually inspired this interview in no small way. I first went there in November, which was, I think, the height of the pupping season.
Yes, yeah, it'll have been just kicking off.
What a fantastic experience that was. I mean, I've been around and I've seen a lot of wildlife, but that took some beating. I mean, you could certainly get, within a metre of them. But yeah, an unbelievable experience, Donna Nook. Matt, what 3 books or people or meetings have most influenced your thinking?
A bit of a cliche one. I'm sure you'll ask any animal person this and they will say David Attenborough, but he's unbeatable in terms of education, in terms of bringing nature to every person's home on the planet, theoretically, now that he's on Netflix as well. My granddad, he started Natureland in 1965 and he took a big risk. He used to be in insurance before he did this. And he saw an advert in a local paper and it said a marine zoo manager wanted. He had kept guppies in his garage. I think that was the extent of his marine knowledge. So he dragged his whole family from Yorkshire, 2 young kids, to Skegness and started Natureland. And within the first year of operating, somebody brought him a baby seal and said, what can you do with this? And he didn't like turning down challenges or turning away poorly animals. So he took it in and developed Natureland into the rescue centre instead. Every other seal rescuer in England, really, the amount of dedication they put into the animals, often they're volunteers doing it off their own backs. They end up with seals in their garages and force feeding animals at 2 a.m. and tube feeding baby seals and whatnot. It does require a lot of dedication sometimes. So it's quite impressive the number of people that are willing to do that simply for a wild animal that you could have just left on a beach. It's impressive, really.
How do you set up a seal sanctuary?
You would need funding, obviously. Seals aren't cheap. Each seal costs approximately £2,000 to rehabilitate. You would need a site to work from, most likely talking to the council or the government about holding animals, particularly wild animals, as I believe it is illegal unless you've got appropriate qualifications or licensing to take in animals onto a site for an extended period of time. I certainly think you need the okay with the council to.
Matt, do you take on volunteers?
At the moment, we don't. We are looking into that system, which is something that we would like to do. Volunteers can be very useful for a sanctuary. It's just that extra pair of hands, even for the simple jobs like weighing out fish for the seals in the morning, it saves our other keepers 5-10 minutes, so that they can be putting those 5 and 10 minutes towards really observing and caring for the seals in our care even more so.
How much of a challenge is it, Matt, to find suitably willing vets to treat your seals?
It's always a complicated one, that one. Often vets are willing, and you could ask the most local vet you can, just around the corner we've got one, to help. But within a few weeks, they are going to be regretting that decision, because seals are full on, particularly in the summer. We'll be contacting them daily. And then obviously with our desire to understand seals more, sadly, the ones that don't survive, we want full post-mortems doing on them, and that takes up time and resources as well. So they soon start thinking, oh, we've taken on too much. And we've recently faced that difficulty where we were struggling to find a vet to work with us. Our original vet was being overwhelmed and was looking to wind down their surgery a bit. So we now have to drive 40-50 minutes to our nearest kind of willing vet. Fortunately, these guys have worked with seals in other sanctuaries for 20-30 years, so they've got a good understanding.
Is there anything that you'd like to add?
It's quite hard to get your initial experience sometimes. You might get lucky, you might have a local animal centre that's dying for experience or inexperienced workers to come with them. But don't give up on it. Keep asking around. Be willing to travel a little bit to these centres if you can. Any experience that you get with any animal will be valuable to you. It will give you that understanding of animal care, that it's not just giving a rabbit a cuddle every day. It's shoveling stuff in one end and sadly cleaning up what comes out the other end. It's messy, dirty work, but it's very rewarding and it's well worth pursuing. You've just got to be willing to pursue it.
Matt, it's been fascinating talking to you. It's been inspirational. You're obviously totally committed, and I wish you good luck with your conservation work on seals. Matthew Eden of Natureland, Skegness. Thank you very much for being on the Fresh Animal channel. Matthew Eden.
That was Matthew Eden, co-director of Natureland Seal Sanctuary, Skegness in England. To work with seals, first and foremost, you need animal experience. Getting seal experience specifically is going to be quite a challenge. So any animal experience, particularly with wildlife, will be beneficial. Then get a qualification in an animal-related discipline. Getting a good degree is my suggestion. I think if you do, you'll never regret it. But if a degree really is not for you, then other qualifications may do. There are plenty of animal courses in British universities and land-based colleges nowadays. Alternatively, if you can demonstrate transferable skills from other life experience, that may be enough. In terms of personal qualities, you will need to be observant, be compassionate, be dedicated, and don't give up. If you found the video useful, please click like and please consider subscribing to the channel. Thank you very much for your time.